to be discussing the great knowledge acceleration with y'all. Um, a really, I think, important lens, especially when it comes to AI and just our organizations in general. So we're going to tackle this a little bit journalistic style, the who, what, when, where, why kind of format. But I also think inevitably it makes sense to start with the why. Why are you joining me and hopefully not wasting your time this evening to get some excellent information? I believe there's some pretty significant factors affecting the workforce in general. I'm going to run through a quick list here. The first one I want to allude to is the stretching of the workforce, as in the range of people working has really never been greater. Some stats on that front. The 65 and over demographic has doubled as far as participation in the workforce since the 80s, and the 75 plus workforce demographic is the fastest growing cohort in the workforce. So we have people from their teens to their 80s, 90s, and beyond in the workforce, which means we have a lot of different norms and expectations. And obviously, that can sometimes lead to knowledge transfer challenges. And they're off coming down. It's going to be a photo finish. No reason for me to do that. Just like to liven up these slides. Anyone make any money on the Derby? It was just a few weeks ago, right? No.
Lost
Okay.
it all.
That's probably the people who didn't have to show up to the webinar, right? They're off on their island. This is the makeup of the workforce as it currently stands. As you can see, it goes millennials, Gen X, to many people's surprise, Gen Z, just in the last year or so, overtook the baby boomer generation to already be third most represented in the workforce. And as you can see, this trajectory on that arrow is aggressively rising. Now, another factor that I think doesn't get enough attention is we have the baby boomer generation rapidly retiring and approaching retirement age. It's actually 11,000 baby boomers in the US daily who hit retirement age eligibility, 65, which will be 30 million people by 2030. And by the way, 2030 is the cutoff for the entire generation having hit age 65. So we're already in 2025. The clock is ticking in terms of capturing that knowledge at our organizations. And then when we look at digital natives, which is really millennials and Gen Z combined, they actually today make up roughly 2/3 of the workforce. So that again is oftentimes very surprising to people. And one of the challenges as it relates to knowledge at our organizations is they tend to have pretty low retention rates, on average between 2 and 3 years. So that presents its own challenges. In addition, I underline digital here because as generations who grew up with the internet and being able to look up anything on their phones or computers, that it tends to be their tendency. A little bit repetitive there, but they tend to pursue information digitally first as opposed to turning to a colleague or a manager walking down the hall. And then this one breaks my heart a little bit. A lot of organizations really struggle with this concept of knowledge transfer. It is estimated that roughly 40% of the knowledge of our organizations stored right up here and nowhere else. So yeah, that presents its own challenges. And then the baby boomers, for one survey of baby boomers who had retired, only 1 in every 5 indicated that their organization asked them, like, what do you know? What do we need to learn from you before you leave? Which again, to me, just really kind of sad. In addition to just the business challenges affiliated with that, but just legacy building generally. And then we have this little factor called artificial intelligence. Y'all probably haven't heard anything about that there. Um, and what is the factor? How is that going to play a role in this whole organizational knowledge ecosystem? In some ways, there's a threat that it could exacerbate the problem because digital natives could turn to AI for practically everything. Or, as you may have understood from the description of my talk, I do actually think there's a lot of potential here to enhance our knowledge transfer and exchange programs at our organizations and really throughout our world, frankly. This is my big scary number. 47 million. Ooh. We all know every good talk has to have a big scary number. This is a workplace knowledge and productivity report. They estimated that large businesses in the US lose 47 million every year due to ineffective knowledge sharing. Now, again, that is a nice, juicy, big, scary number. It is also pretty much contextless for those of us who aren't working at one of the biggest orgs in the world. So this one I thought was much more relatable, which they estimated that workers waste roughly 5 hours every single week waiting for vital information from their colleagues or recreating tools or resources or write-ups that already exist, have already been created at their orgs. Does that sound more relatable to y'all? I feel like, honestly, frankly, 5 hours seems almost like an underestimate. Those inefficiencies potentially losing 20 to 30% of revenue. So yeah, those are some numbers that I'm hoping get our attention today. So what's in it for you? Why should you care about this topic? Well, from a more senior, more tenured employee's point of view, one, legacy building. Like I referred to earlier, sadly, many organizations are not capturing the legacies of many of their more senior employees. The idea that knowledge transfer, if done right, is always a two-way street, and that we're learning from one another as well. And also sharing tends to crystallize our own insights and information when we go through that sharing process. For someone who's more junior in their career, obviously there's a lot of potential to accelerate your own understanding, create those networks, and digital natives, having grown up with the internet, tend to have a real desire to know the why behind practically everything. They've never not been able to just quickly search something and find out the why. And so this process, especially mentorship style relationships with more senior employees, is a great way to get that why. And obviously, from an organizational perspective, from both sides and from everyone, we're making sure that we get that knowledge for our project teams and for our organizations as a whole, so that we are setting ourselves up for both the present and the future. Okay, so there's your framework, some of the big factors affecting why we should hopefully care about this situation. A little bit quick details on me. As was introduced, my name is Luke Goetting. I have a consultancy, LTG Strategy. I have a podcast. I will share links to those as well. Excited that I've got an upcoming book about unlocking next gen talent. And I did a TEDx talk last fall about the Great Workplace Rewrite. So all that to say, this is something I think about and work on quite often, which has allowed me to have some amazing speaking opportunities. Obviously, my favorite being PMI. But my fun fact is that of all the speaking ops I've done, including tonight, the most challenging just so happened to be my first. And the reason I say that is because not only was I the kindergarten circus ringleader, announcing all the other acts of the kindergartners at the kindergarten circus, I also had to double as the strong man. That's me pictured here. So yeah, this was a pretty heavy lift, no pun intended. Both being the MC essentially, and the strongman act. So I'm still brainstorming. If you get ideas in the chat, how I can bring this strongman act back, I'm all open to ideas here. Now, beyond me, who are we working with in the workforce? These four generations represent roughly between 98 and 99% of the workforce as it currently stands today. Our baby boomers, our Gen Xers, our millennials, and our Gen Z. So we'll primarily refer to them today, but I also want to give an honorable mention to the silent generation, the generation that preceded the baby boomers. We already pretty soon we'll start to have Gen Alpha entering the workforce. Some states it is possible quite young to start working. And then here is my dinner party fun fact. If you store this one, as of 2025, we have a new generation in the workforce, Gen Beta. They are 0 years old. This started as of January 1st. So, not to try to age everyone here, but yeah, we're already like 3 generations beyond the millennials at this point. Things are moving fast. Inevitably, when we're talking about generations, we're going to make some sweeping statements here. So, this is my obligatory disclaimer. And I also wanted to make sure you are aware I've got a cheat sheet I'll make available at the end of today's session. And then, of course, the link to the various resources I allude to. So, especially anytime you see a list type of thing, do note that will absolutely be on the cheat sheet. But I really wanted to learn about y'all a bit as well. And I know we have a smaller group, but I'm still hoping you'll entertain me in using this tool called Slido. And I just pasted it in the chat. If you're able to just click on that, it should bring up a digital room where we can do some polls. The reason I like to share this, I think it can be a really effective project management tool. So looks like I've already got some votes. All right, people are on it. First question, what generation are you? Like I said, the link should work. If for whatever reason you're having a problem, you can also scan this QR code with your phone. Or as a third option, you can literally just go to slido.com where you'll be prompted for an event code and it will just be Gen Z. I just picked a generation to highlight there. Cool, so what generation are you? Looks like a pretty decent chunk of Gen Xers, but all right, we've got all 4 of the big ones represented. Awesome. So we got a good mix here. And then let me also ask, this one I'm very fascinated by. Where is your org on its AI journey? And I've got 5 options there. I tried to kind of capture what I thought was probably the most indicative. So take your best jump at which one of these makes the most sense. Cool, starting to get these in. Y'all liking the tool, by the way? Have you used Slido before? Yeah, my favorite thing. Cool. As you see, it's like so fast and so easy to use. And one of my favorite things, the reason I share this at the webinar as opposed to just using the built-in tools in Teams or Zoom is because I love to use this for in-person meetings as well. Whether it's a kind of an all-hands larger gathering or just my project team, it can be really useful to get some quantitative data. Actually, you can do both quantitative and qualitative. So yeah, I just love how easy and quick it tends to be. Cool. All right, let's take a look at this data here. And by the way, you can see at the top right, 10 people have weighed in, so that's kind of handy to know too. Okay, individual usage. That is a very popular response typically, but look at this, I'm impressed. Already 40% of y'all have leaned into this as a strategic priority. So that's impressive. And then a few are not allowed at this point, which is totally fair, especially common with government and government-esque organizations. And then even department and strategic. All right, so yeah, I'm impressed, y'all. We have pretty good usage adoption so far of AI, so that's exciting. And by the way, I'm throwing this to y'all now. I expect some good insights, and let's throw some ideas in the chat too if we've got this much usage already. Okay, cool. So we're going to pause that for just a moment, and I'm going to throw it over to a quick preview. The fun thing about my talks, at least I think it's fun, you'll be the judge. I tend to just tailor it to whatever y'all want to talk about. So what I'm going to do now is give you a 3-section preview, and then I'll throw it to a poll back on Slido. You will tell me what is your top priority to discuss this evening. So I picked a small segment of each to give you a taste of what the section's like, and then again, you will vote on it. So 3 sections. One's a deeper dive on the generations, getting to know them and the workforce. One of them is more human to human, modern twists on classic mentoring strategies as it relates to the workforce. And one is, as you have understood from the title, more about AI tools that can help facilitate knowledge transfer on our project teams and at our organizations. So here's my quick preview, and then you'll tell me what you want to prioritize most tonight. So for the generational one, I do a breakdown of each generation. I did want to share with you the Gen Z one right now, because this is probably the generation you have worked with the least, simply given that they're the newest to the workforce. So a few formative events for Gen Z. COVID-19, a major one. This is a generation that the oldest Gen Z, who are 28 years old now, were just entering the workforce when COVID hit. Others were just getting their first, high school graduations, college graduations, maybe first internships or jobs. So this was extremely disruptive to their lives, and sadly resulted in a lot of really formative events disappearing on them. I remember watching my cousin's virtual college graduation, and it was essentially a credits on a movie, there goes his name, and it's gone. A little underwhelming for $100,000+. A generation very concerned about the long-term health of our planet, especially with temperatures changing and more extreme weather events taking place. A generation that grew up with not only social media, but really video forward social media tools like TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels. In terms of pop culture, I just cherry picked some for each generation. Billie Eilish, Bad Bunny, movies like the Black Panther and the series of Mockingjay, the Hunger Games series. And then in terms of favorite food, for Gen Z, I didn't pick a specific one. I just made the point that it's got to be shareable. It's got to be Instagrammable. So that's your pop culture references, a little bit about Gen Z. But also, in terms of the workplace, this is really what I would call the first pure digital native generation. Millennials, I'm a millennial. We had a period where we didn't have internet access, most of us at least, unless we're very advanced access early adopters. Whereas Gen Z has always had access to the internet since the moment they could steal their parents' iPads. So that means they are always used to being able to search for information digitally. They are extremely used to the multimodal alerts and notifications and communications that come with the internet, and all the psychology that those attention grabbing that those apps have been designed for. As part of that, they're extremely used to consuming information very quickly. And so this is a really interesting element when it comes to communicating with them on our project teams, creating resources for them. Now for the human to human section, one idea I like to share is, instead of mentoring or reverse mentoring, I like to just kind of combine those and talk about this concept of co-mentoring, really implying a two-way path, a two-way street. And instead of it just being one-on-one sort of corporate ladder style mentorship, I like to propose things like project-based mentorship or skills-based mentorship, or even, and some of y'all might be wondering, what's that heart doing there in a business presentation? Even the idea of sort of speed dating style mentorship. So we can talk more about those in a moment. And then for the AI section, one of the lowest hanging fruit, I think, is simply capturing important conversations and then transcribing them via AI. So first of all, transcription tools, some of y'all are probably using it today. Probably Teams, I know, has it built in many cases. Tools like Otter. I use Fathom when I'm doing my Zoom or Teams integration. So simply capturing the transcripts of our conversations, but then injecting that into the AI and starting to create high quality training resources or captured conversations that we can then refer back to. And for resources that we need to access across our team or across our organization, injecting those high quality resources into the knowledge base themselves. So again, low hanging fruit, very low degree of difficulty to do this, and I can walk through it in more depth. With all that said, let me throw it to you. The poll should be, let's see if I can get that to go live. Should be active again. That Slido link, if you lost it, just click on the link in the chat one more time. The tweak here is that this poll I'm throwing to you is actually a ranking poll. So you get to tier 1, 2, 3, which you're most interested in based on what I just shared there in the preview. Real quick while you're weighing in, which looks like some of y'all are very much on the ball. I'm a huge fan of this ranking poll. I like to use it anytime I'm doing a brainstorming session, especially because I feel like sometimes you get all these ideas from your team and it can be a little bit paralyzing to know how to rank them according to one another. And so I'm a huge fan of the ranking poll because it's not just capturing one input, it's getting that tiered information. And y'all can't see it on this audience view here, but on my admin view, I actually, out of 3, I get statistics for each of these. So I can see AI has a 2.43, human has a 2.14, generations has a 1.38. So I'm getting some real metrics as to my team's buy-in, or my organizational buy-in, or my client buy-in to these different ideas. So I'm just a huge fan of this feature as well. This is sometimes a more subtle one that people aren't as used to. Cool. So it looks like AI, then human to human, then if we have time, generations in the workplace. I like that selection there. I'm going to pause that now. With that said, before we dive in, Sherry, Christine, anyone, questions, comments so far? Am I sounding and looking as good as can be in the context of what I have to offer?
So it's interesting. I just sent my boss a message. Actually, we have talked about knowledge transfer because unfortunately we've had a few colleagues that have lost their battle with cancer or for other things in the last we've had 4 pretty high leaders in the last year that we've lost, and it's, you just wonder how much knowledge you're missing actually getting from them. I mean, it's a little different than retirement, obviously, but it's a point that we've been talking about at work, that we have to get better at really making sure we're getting stuff out of people's head and on paper, on files, on whatever. We can't have so much tribal knowledge up in our head,
Yes.
and not really capture it somehow. So that just rang very true with me when you talked about that.
Yes, and a very important point, and I'm sorry for your loss and your organization's loss. And I fully agree. In fact, when I started strategizing this, I was framing it most of the time in the context of like an exit interview. But we all know those last week or two when someone is leaving, if we have the benefit of someone giving notice, that's always a crazy scramble, right? So to your point, Sherry, actually just creating this much more of a more systemic, maybe make sure we're allotting time to do these knowledge transfer strategies weekly, at least monthly. That's the best case scenario because then we are capturing it in a much more organic way when these situations arise, as opposed to just trying to get as much as possible in the last few days as they're halfway out the door. Oh, and yeah, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I mean, you may already touch on this, Luke. So if I'm getting ahead of you, feel free to tell me to bugger off. But I've seen the same sort of in my personal experience, seeing what you guys are speaking to as far as just the lack of prioritization of knowledge transfer. I was just kind of curious, in your experience, what is it like culturally in the business leadership space that's not prioritizing that? Like, it's been my personal experience. I have never had a directive come from above that says, ensure that you have effective knowledge transfer happening amongst your teams. It's always me going up saying, hey, we got to cut some time aside for this. But when I've done business analysis of like successful businesses in the past, it seemed like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, like replacement strategies and mentoring seem to be a bigger component of business strategy. And I don't know if maybe my perception is wrong, but it seems from my standpoint that it seems to have really fallen off, over the last couple decades.
Yeah, great observation. I'm not sure if I have a directly correlated stat to that. That'd be really interesting to find. But in any case, I think it's an interesting observation, and perhaps there's an element of, and this works both ways, right? Perhaps there's more this idea that people are more interchangeable than they used to be, and then from employees' perspectives, jobs are more interchangeable than they used to be. But to me, there's almost an irony to that. It's like, well, if people are turning over more regularly, even isn't that even more of a reason that we need to be capturing their knowledge? I know if some of y'all are in the government space, we've seen just crazy turnover there and people just disappearing with decades of experience on a moment's notice, right? And it happens in a lot of industries when you have mass layoffs. So yeah, I don't have a great answer for you, but I think it's an interesting observation. And all that to say, I think one of the things is it's just sort of a pain, right? It's not directly related to sales or marketing or growth at face value. I think it plays such a huge role in long-term growth of organizations. But because it doesn't have that seemingly immediate impact, it sometimes gets cast as just sort of like a touchy-feely employee engagement kind of concept. Um, so that's what I'll say for now. We're going to get into a lot of the tactical elements in just a moment. But yeah, appreciate y'all both sharing those observations. Let me flip back we'll get into some AI strategies, which is cool because we wanted to touch on the newest exciting stuff. As you may have inferred, this would be an inferred situation. As you may have inferred, this is a dynamic talk. So no matter what you chose, I could go in any direction, but because y'all chose AI, that's where we're gonna go. And you can tell it's AI because I created this fancy little video landing slide. So this is pretty serious here. um, Please, we'll have some time to chat later, but also throw things in the box itself because this is every day this landscape of AI changes. So let's please not just rely on me to provide all the insights, share what your understandings are and your experiences are as well. And also, obligatory disclaimer here, I like being invited to talks. I like to be invited back to speak with y'all. So please do not just go off doing things I shared and not checking on your company policies first, because that doesn't make me look really good. So I need to make sure that we have this slide. We're recording, so Sherry, we've got this documented. We can proceed. So I first wanted to share, I found this fascinating. McKinsey came out with an AI report. This is hot off the presses 2025. There were some really interesting insights. I just picked out a few that I wanted to share. The first one that I thought was really interesting is that employees in general are using generative AI, large language models, at 3 times the rate as their leaders, managers, bosses are perceiving them to be using it. So that's kind of interesting, right? And in fairness, there's probably a reason why people aren't super broadcasting that they're using these tools. However, interestingly, those same bosses, managers, leaders are 2.4 times more likely to cite employee readiness as the reason they haven't done a large-scale strategic rollout of AI tools. So we have this interesting disconnect right now between employees being pretty ready and being willing to use these tools and the way that management is perceiving things. So I wanted to share that little tidbit with y'all. This is the way I'm going to roll this out for you is how I would want it rolled out, which is in degree of difficulty or ease of implementation. So we've got kind of 1, 2, 3 tiers here. The first one is stuff you could do with a lot of existing tools like your chat GPTs, your Claudes, and then we'll get into a little bit more advanced. So we'll start with the lowest hanging fruit here. Sometimes the video gets upset when I jump back from the different screen. So first of all, the lowest degree of difficulty, y'all are all PMI members. That means you have access to PMI Infinity. Do we have some PMI Infinity users in the house?
Mhm.
Cool.
That's up, Travis. Travis actually talked about PMI Infinity at one of our meetings, so he's a huge
Perfect.
fan.
Cool. Well, we'll just have to keep emphasizing it. You have essentially the vast world of incredible knowledge, and I say that because I do talk to a variety of industries, and like PMI Infinity it's pretty incredible that PMI has really taken this on for y'all and made this resource available. So just wanted to make sure and give this a shout out. Things you can start accessing now through your PMI membership, PMI Infinity. I mentioned this earlier, this idea of conversation capture. The reason I think this is honestly the lowest hanging fruit and arguably, in my opinion, the most impactful when it comes to knowledge transfer. This is literally just making sure via ideally audio or video that we are capturing strategic conversations as it relates to people doing their jobs. Important conversations around that. So from a technical side, what are we doing? Well, we're using tools like Otter, Teams, Fathom to simply gather the audio transcripts from these conversations. Then we are taking those audio conversations and putting them into our AI tools. And that can be as simple as your chat GPTs. And then we are asking those AI tools to create guides and resources and documentation around those conversations. And then after we've curated it, edited it, make sure it's high quality, taking those and putting them into our knowledge base. And as we talked about a little bit before, the typical impetus for this to happen is when someone is departing, whether it's a promotion, leaving, getting transferred, just leaving our org generally. But that is a scramble oftentimes. But I would say, at the very least, make sure you are doing this at the end, getting an understanding of how people are doing their jobs and insights they want to share. But if you could ideally program that into just your regular cadence, that is much more valuable and much more natural to do it when you are capturing these conversations on a more regular basis. So project retrospectives, as an example, stakeholder meetings. Obviously, again, we need to make sure that everyone involved is willing to have these transcribed. But as I feel like it's pretty common now, including this meeting here that we're doing today.
So I have a question. Can I ask a question, or do you want me to wait?
You can. I'll just say quickly, I will show a little bit of a demo of that concept in just a moment. But yeah, feel free to hit me with it.
So I'm curious how, if you have any concerns about, when you capture every single thing said in a meeting, are you concerned that later on it could be subpoenaed or used as part of discovery, versus when somebody's taking notes, maybe some conversations aren't necessarily recorded?
Yeah, great point. Yes, I am concerned, and yes, you want to be strategic about which meetings you're taking these notes for. Absolutely. So I wouldn't have it just be a default by any means. But again, when everyone has visibility on it and when we can schedule it in, things like when we're doing onboarding for new employees is a great time to capture these conversations, or when we're having important strategic trainings. These are times I have found that I've created most of these resources when I just recognize that, hey, whatever meeting I'm about to have, this is a meeting I will likely need to refer back to this information in the future when I train in someone new. That's when I found to be the most useful. And then I can create a quick hitting guide using this principle. But yeah, be very conscious of it. I don't think it should be a default always on kind of thing. But again, once you have it, that's the beauty. You can use these tools. My personal favorite, y'all, is called Claude. It's essentially an equivalent to a chat GPT. I personally find it just feels a little bit more human-y, a little smarter in my opinion. So Claude.ai is that version there. But the brilliant thing is you can take a hour-long meeting transcript and you can have it condense it down into a one-page quick hitting doc or a 20-page doc, depending on the depth that you want. And you can keep reorganizing and reshuffling this information in the ways that are most valuable to your team members and to your employees. And again, make sure if it's a evergreen kind of resource, make sure it's accessible across your team and across your organization. So talking about project plans and how can we create maybe simple versions of those. I'm not saying we're not going to refer to the more in-depth ones, but it's great to have the quick hitting ones as well. Risk management framework visualizations, again, resources that tend to be extremely complex. How can we create simplified versions that can be more useful and accessible on a quick moment's notice? I'm going to combine all these three in just a second. So stay with me for a second because I'm going to talk about short form video, which is not necessarily directly AI, but it can facilitate that. So especially as I mentioned, where our audiences and our coworkers are now increasingly becoming digital, not becoming, they already are, but the percentage is more digital natives than ever before and will continue to rise. We know that short form video is a very engaging medium. And as project leaders, it can be very compelling, not just externally creating TikTok dances, but internally communicating with your staff and with your team members. I call this concept influencer leadership. And the great news is it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be those classic talking into a cell phone, walking down a street kind of videos, but it does create a much more engaging experience. I'm going to try to share a video. I know it's not always great or sometimes inaudible entirely in a webinar format. This one does have subtitles, so hopefully you can follow along in any case. But what I wanted to share is this Mark Cuban edited video for Masterclass. The point I want to make is it is only 17 seconds long, and I'm hoping you can see how much gets communicated in this 17 seconds. So again, we'll do our best with the audio, but if not, just follow along with the subtitles here. Were y'all able to hear that at all? Oh, bummer.
No.
But could you read it a little bit? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, good. Yeah, sorry about that. I try to get that to work. But in any case, okay. So yeah, Mark talking about his failures, his successes, but hopefully, I know you don't get the full experience without the audio, but hopefully you get a sense of like still kind of told a full story in just a brief amount of time. And so here's where this can all come together. So we got Mark's video. And then this is one of my favorite parts of this whole thing. A shout out to the humble old Microsoft Word here, which you didn't probably think you were going to hear on an AI talk. But Microsoft Word has a transcribe feature. It's this dictate tab, and if you click the tab itself, there will be an option to transcribe. And so what I did is I uploaded that Mark Cuban video file, and then it spit out this transcript for me, just like that. I didn't have to touch it. And you got that there. And then I take that and I inject it into Claude and I say, can you turn this Mark Cuban audio file into a one-page guide? Boom. It immediately starts creating a resource around that. And then I grab that. Ironically, I put it back into Word. Shout out to Word. And it creates this document here. Embracing failure, insights from Mark Cuban, the power of perspective, what people remember, key takeaways, even applying Cuban's wisdom. Like pretty amazing stuff. It actually went beyond what I asked and created even more usefulness. Now again, like with any AI, you want to make sure and go through it, make sure it is a high quality perspective there. But I was really impressed by this. And this is where this becomes amazing. I have, as I mentioned earlier, I just earmarked webinars that I was already delivering and have created some incredible guides from that. Stuff I wish I could have created by myself, but I never would have gotten around to doing. Now I can do automatically and not even really much extra time creating those resources. So when it comes to video, Video for technique demonstrations can be a lot more powerful than a text-based guide, but when you start with video, you can create the text-based guides from that. That's why it's really the highest form of starting point, because now we can go to text off of that. Stakeholder comms, examples, how we facilitate meetings, team meetings, for example, client meetings, and any type of tools and software and video, as I'm sure you know. It's much easier to see someone moving around than trying to read some sort of help article about that. Moving right along, knowledge mining. This one's amazing because it doesn't really require much from you. Just keep an eye out for what's available at your organization. So for example, SharePoint and a tool called Alfresco for knowledge bases, SharePoint being from Microsoft, which is very common, obviously. The idea here is that knowledge bases are getting smarter. And instead of traditionally searching content from tags, these knowledge bases are now starting to leverage AI to analyze the documents and resources in their knowledge bases themselves, so that we're not just searching based off of titles or tags are great, but who even keeps those up? Like realistically, they get outdated, I feel, or just don't get inputted very quickly. So yes, this is an exciting thing that oftentimes can be happening on the back end. So check into that. This might be a feature that already is available to you depending on your knowledge base. Yeah, that's pretty obvious, the PM implications there. So moving along, I want to share some more advanced, exciting techniques here. So this is going to require a little bit of investment or buy-in probably. So this is why this kind of becomes tier 2 here. But another quick hitting insight from that McKinsey report is that employees of organizations, when asked, who do you trust more, your own org to implement AI strategies and tools or externally? Things like, I don't know, government institutions or other organizations in your industry. Overwhelming, well, 30% more people said they trust their own orgs to implement AI in the so-called right way. So I thought that was enlightening. It does feel like people in general trust their orgs to roll out AI and to do it in a way that is valuable. So again, there is a reasonable amount of buy-in based on these insights. Okay, this one's so cool. When I reference these tools here, so this is core.ai or Acera, not necessarily explicit endorsements here, but I want to give you a framework for the category so you can do your own research. So these are some examples in this category. The concept is called intelligent knowledge capture, but a more simplified version is essentially we are creating specific AI chatbots for individual functions or individual tasks, insights that we want to share. So this isn't PMI Infinity, huge database of everything. This is very specific to a certain function. I'll share some PM examples in a moment, but this is the one I like to start with because I think it's super relatable. The idea, our company, our organization rolls out a new product or service. And as we all know, that oftentimes comes with dozens, hundreds of pages of documentation, all these new concepts and features and frequently asked questions that we need to absorb. What comes to mind to me oftentimes is oftentimes sales or account managers or project managers are on the front lines for these conversations. And so the idea being, we have created an AI chatbot very specific to this new product or service. And so now if I get that question, I don't have to search through this massive documentation portal around that product. And I don't have to wait on whomever, whether it's product or marketing, to create a frequently asked questions list. I can just ask the AI chatbot, which has all that information at a moment's notice. So this is to me very exciting, and you can create these little depositories through tools like this. Obviously for PM methodology, really thrilled with this idea. If you work with a lot of different industries, it could be hard to bounce around, especially if you're managing multiple project teams at once. So having a chatbot specific to healthcare, specific to a certain sector of manufacturing or banking, and being able to talk about potential regulatory implications, stakeholder implications, etc. And then also, yeah, risk response. So this to me is, again, something that could be extremely valuable. That idea of having that intelligent knowledge capture. And then one that's a little bit more underrated, but this idea of smart mentoring. I mentioned earlier, so tools in this category: Together, Mentor, Click with a Q. I mentioned earlier, traditionally mentoring tends to be very corporate laddery, as in oftentimes you're meeting with your boss or your boss's boss, someone who's been in the role that you are currently in. And while valuable, that tends to take a relatively narrow, in my view, uh, look at what mentorship means. And so some of these tools, they get a much more well-rounded perspective as to what you're trying to achieve or what your team members are trying to achieve at your organization. And maybe what they most are interested in is, for example, some of those soft skills or power skills. Things like, how do I give a presentation? How do I conduct a team meeting or a client meeting? How do I conduct a review? And those aren't always the best people, just your boss or your boss's boss. Maybe it's someone from a different branch. Maybe it's someone from around the world at an entirely different office at your organization. If you are international, this software can analyze the whole org and create strategic pairings for people based on what they've indicated they're most interested in. Um, Super exciting to me, this idea that we can get into this idea of matchmaking of people who've never met, and maybe even the people who are running the mentorship program have never met these people, but these tools can create these connections to help create value in their careers. Again, industry methodology can be extremely valuable for someone who's less experienced or inexperienced entirely in that industry. And then the idea I talked earlier about, like this idea of speed dating and micro mentoring. Maybe it's a 15 to 30-minute overview of a tool or of a process, and creating formats where people can do a variety of these micro mentorship meetings quickly. And then knowledge markets. Uh, we talked about this earlier, this idea that it's difficult to make time to capture knowledge at our organizations. And so I wanted to share this story with y'all. I think it's really incredible. So first of all, when it comes to our knowledge bases, making sure that everything's digitally accessible through smartphones and through our traditional computers, that's hopefully obvious. But especially as we have digital natives becoming the large percentage of the workforce. But here's what I really want to emphasize is making sure that we're scheduling time and that we're gamifying the process a bit for people to be incentivized to contribute. I'll talk more on that in just a moment. Some AI-based knowledge markets you can be aware of: Guru, Stack Overflow, Yext, IT Glue, I think that one's called. All of these are just to get you in the category. This is a screenshot from G2 Crowd on the right, which is one of my favorite tools to research the whole sector for different software and platforms. So it's called G2 Crowd. So check that out if you're interested. But this example is, to me, a really exciting one, where this is from Cisco. They had this technical assistant center, and this was customer facing, by the way, both internally but primarily externally. And so they had this situation, them being a massive global organization, where they had 4,000 these technical engineers all around the world who had all this incredible knowledge in their heads, and it wasn't documented hardly anywhere. And so they created this elegant but relatively simple strategy. They created what they called the Knowledge Champions League. So obviously kind of modeled off of European soccer or football. And so they created this game where these different teams were challenged to create as much the high value video and text-based content as they could. And the winners were rewarded with, I'm going to kind of call it a vacation, but it wasn't quite a vacation. It was essentially, you get to pick any of the offices that Cisco has around the world, and they would pay for you to go work there for 2 weeks. So a working vacation, but still really cool to be able to travel anywhere around the world. So relatively straightforward, relatively easy idea. The results were incredible. 5 times the rate of resources created for people who are participating in this game. this challenge versus those who weren't, resulting in 1 million views externally. Estimated case deflection savings of doubling from the previous year before they had this program, from 27 million up to about 54 million. All for the cost of flying someone to a different office and throwing them in a hotel for a few weeks. Like, pretty incredible impact there. And then the last note on, I guess we're coming right up against the hour. So let me bring it home, and then we can certainly, I can stay on longer if we want to. But as a reminder, the time is now to get this. We talked about the different generations, especially the idea that our baby boomer generation is rapidly retiring, and we need to be able to capture their insights, and really anyone who's leaving, being promoted, transferred, etc. AI has made this process so much easier and less labor intensive than sitting down and trying to pump out a word-based report on something that you do with your job. Now, remember our big scary problem here, that 47 million lost due to inefficient knowledge transfer. But really much more this day-to-day impact that we feel regularly. So I hope you all have some strategies and ideas to really take action on knowledge transfer. I would love to keep the momentum with y'all. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. My last name's Goetting. It's usually pretty easy to find. It's a little bit of an unusual one. I'll share that link to my podcast in just a moment, Gen Z at Work. Also, if you, again, I'm happy to stick around, but also if you want to communicate with me on any of my digital channels, happy to answer any unanswered questions. This is obviously just a small taste of a much deeper workshop here. I speak at management events, leadership conferences. I have a TEDx talk that I can share y'all on a similar topic as this. So let me know if you're interested in any of that. I also have a talk, kind of a sister talk to this one, about unlocking Gen Z potential, a deeper dive on the newest generation in the workforce. Cheat sheet, Slido. By the way, if you like Slido, I have a coupon code for you to use it. I just asked them, and they said they would make that available, so I thought, incredible. All that to say, this is live on Slido right now. I would really appreciate if y'all would be willing to let me know what you thought of today's session. I'll paste that again. And so just a quick hitting survey. And if you want any of those resources, just check the box, enter your email, I'll get those sent out to you. So that's what I've got. Really appreciate y'all's time today. And again, happy to continue conversing.
Luke, we have a question in the chat, if you can address that one. I don't know if you want to read it or want me to read it.
I'll take a look here. So John
asked, I can summarize it too, which is really just, having been through multiple technology generations, being one of the older guys now, you rattle off a ton of different tools, and it seems like there's something hitting the marketplace every day in an area, from the AI perspective. Do you see a shakedown coming? And it's like, where do we, how do we even know where to hitch our wagon? We could be using a tool today and it's gone tomorrow, and what is there going to be some normalization in the marketplace?
I believe so. Obviously, like a lot of internet companies in the decades preceding, there's a race to capture market share. Whether or not that's affiliated with a strong P&L leaves a lot of questions to be determined in the future. So I think that's a very fair observation, John, which is why, for the most part, I like to talk about these strategically and conceptually, because I do think even if some of these tools come and go, that's, in my mind, that's part of what makes artificial intelligence, these tools, so useful, is that they're not as ultra prescriptive the way that like a Trello versus an Asana versus a Jira, like very different experiences. And not to say that the AI tools aren't different too, but we can use ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, DeepSeek, like we can use those all pretty much the same way in most cases. And so I think while there definitely will be some consolidation long term, hopefully a lot of these are just strategic concepts that we can use with a variety of tools.
Great, thank you.
course. Keep an eye out on LinkedIn. Like there are so many influencers who create these really handy lists of new tools that they like. Obviously, in some cases, there's a conflict of interest for what they're promoting, but yeah, it's you once you start following a few of those folks, you'll start to see lists come out of different tools in different sectors, and obviously, you can also just ask the AI to produce some lists. Cool. Any other questions, comments, y'all? Was it valuable? Got some ideas?
Yeah, I loved it. I just kind of going along with John's questions and line of thinking I think it's just quite fascinating how many tools are exploding because they're very hyper specific, right? I mean, so many AI tools are like, they've gone down into being very specifically servicing a particular component or feature or capability of, business world, and they're just proliferating quite quickly, and we haven't yet seen that consolidation yet, which I'm sure will probably eventually happen. But yeah, I agree, it is a ton of them out there, and I'm finding that the large monolithic ones like Copilot actually kind of stink, you know, for most of the things that I want to do. So yeah, I end up myself finding like all these small little ones that are very, they hit the microcosm of whatever the particular need is, in my various processes. So yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic space for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Owen, in that. And that's why I like the idea, one of those mid-tier points I made about the chat bots and like a specific function. Totally agree because I found that I've been leveraging an AI Claude to help me with my new book. And I found if I just tried to tackle a macro task, it's not going to be able to process all of the resources that I put into the knowledge base. But if I took it piece by piece in a more strategic way, I got a lot higher quality results, and then I could kind of start building those building blocks to create the overall book. And so yeah, um, not exactly computer science terms that I'm using, but from a user experience, I do absolutely agree when it tends to be a little bit more focused and narrow. That's I think when we get the highest quality results.
I have a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, mine is two questions. First one, Brian, is that a Halo background? Oh, no, it's not. Okay. Second thing is for you, Luke. What tools that you listed off that you're actively using currently that you find the most value from?
Yeah. So my top use one is Claude. Do we have any other Claude users in the house? Okay, getting a few nods. Okay. So I just pasted that in the chat. This is essentially functions a lot like your chat GPT. So this is my powerhouse tool. Like I said, for some reason, I tend to do different tools, or excuse me, test, especially when I'm doing an important task, like I'll test the responses from a chat GPT or even a Gemini and a Claude against one another. And I just tend to like the responses that I get from this the most. I think to Owen said earlier, like Copilot, it's okay. But I have found that Claude is my go-to powerhouse for your kind of everyday types of queries. But yeah, beyond that, the one that I've used, experimented with to an extent, but haven't, but I'm increasingly looking into is that the tools like the core, the chatbot ones that I referred to, the core.ai. I'm super fascinated by those, and the idea, of course, to be able to create your own isolated knowledge base ecosystem, have that data all secured in ways that isn't going to happen with Claude or ChatGPT. Love the concept of those, and then increasingly looking closer at the how those manifest and how they're bringing an impact to organizations. So those are the categories and tools off the top of my head. I should also mention, like, there's some amazing video editing tools like opus.ai or video that help me create content around that I can share thought leadership stuff that I can share on LinkedIn or just as giveaways from my talks. And I'll even preview, I have visions. I'm in the formative stages of actually creating what essentially will become, I think, an audience-driven AI accelerated keynote, where we'll kind of take it open-ended, and we'll use tools like Slido and AI to kind of survey what are your top questions, and then we'll sort of crowdsource in partnership with AI to come up with solutions in real time for the audience. I'm on the early stages of figuring out how that's all going to work technically, but I'm really fascinated by this augmentation process, of really trying to figure out as much from each one another and from the tools available as we can in the process of 30 or 60-minute meeting. But let me open it up. Other recommendations. It's not just me, and I know we got some good AI implementation based on the Slido poll. So what else? What other plugs do we got, y'all?
Have you tried creating your own GPT with some knowledge base so that the questions you ask are based on your own little world?
Yes. Yep. So I use that for, as an example, I coach some other folks on when they're getting involved in the speaking world, and I have some different documents that I create around that. And so I've created individualized GPTs that I can plug in what industry they're working in and what their areas of expertise are, and then all those guides auto update based on that information I plug into them, just the forms that I built. And it's all these is just like what would have taken me an hour. It takes me 5 minutes. It just blows my mind. So yes, and Claude can do that in similar ways to like a Chat GPT. Are you using any specific use cases that you're finding most valuable?
Well, right now for work, I have been on the government account and we're not allowed to use anything. So I do use ChatGPT and Claude for some generic questions that I can get away with. But interestingly, regarding knowledge transfer, this government account is dissolving, has been canceled. So we are working on knowledge transfer for 87 projects in 30 days, and they're all well over millions of dollars each, and it's kind of a big cluster, and we can't use AI
without AI. Okay.
Without AI,
Yeah.
and yeah, wow. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, I will, and yeah, interesting. And I wish you the best of luck, of course.
Yes, thank you.
I will note that the first stage, which it can still be incredibly valuable, is simply the transcription process, and that isn't that is in most cases not AI aided whatsoever. Like
We're not even allowed to do transcription.
Oh, okay. Well, then I've got nothing for you.
Yeah, I know. We've been begging for that, and they say no. So
wow, okay.
I have gotten really good at. I'm the old school transcriptionist. I just because I can type faster than anybody else on our account. I type our meetings. Yep.
Do they allow recording of meetings?
No, we're not even allowed to turn our cameras on.
Wow. So I have some exposure to some government programs as well, and you're operating on a different level that I'm familiar with. That's intense.
Yeah. Yep. Classified. So, but it's getting ready to end, so we'll see.
Best of luck. Other AI tools, plugs that anyone else is seeing success with?
Yeah, I've had a lot of success with Gemini 2.5. So it's tough to keep up with them because they're always iterating on their LLMs, but it's a fantastic model. I've really enjoyed its thoroughness, and I love the ability to expand out its thought process and actually understand what it's thinking and how it got to its answer, which I know I think ChatGPT and Claude are doing those things as well, but we've gotten a lot of traction with Gemini 2.5 Pro or something to that effect. It's been very impressive.
And that, for y'all, that's that's Google's edition,
That's
right? Rayon,
yeah.
And I think you were alluding, and I'll just expand upon it a little bit. A lot of these tools now have what they're calling deep research functions, and so they are, instead of giving you that auto immediate response, they're taking 30 seconds, 60 seconds, sometimes minutes. And in many cases, Claude just introduced this in the last few weeks. They are actually starting to scour the internet so it's that search engine paired with AI, which is very high value. My quick warning for everyone is that we are in a world now where a lot of web pages have been popped up using artificial intelligence that you then have the artificial intelligence tools scouring for and accidentally incorporating into their search results. So for example, I talk about employee engagement a lot. And so I'll have it do deep research around finding success stories, for example. And I have had situations where it was citing back to me case studies for like IBM did this amazing mentorship program. Like, oh, incredible. Can't wait to learn more about that. And then I find the link that it's referring to, and it's a pretty sketchy looking, no citations article about what IBM supposedly had done. And then I'm realizing that page was generated by AI, and now the other AIs are quoting that page. So I will warn you, even in this deep research function, which I think has a perceived higher quality of results, like still be wary and make sure you are checking back to the original links, because yeah, you don't want to be citing these. There's a hilarity to it that it's just AI quoting AI quoting AI, but also obviously can have some real world embarrassing business implications.
It's like the old school copy of a copy of a copy
Yep.
digital version. Yeah.
And so like you'll ask, is this a verified stat? And it'll say, yeah, I found it on this website. I'm like, well, where did that website get it from? Yeah, it's a brave new world for sure.